Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It started with something small. A gut feeling, a whisper in the back of my mind that something wasn't right. Daniel had been acting strange for weeks, smiling at his phone, locking the screen whenever I walked by, and excusing himself to take calls in another room. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. But one night, as he slept soundly beside me, his phone lit up on the nightstand. I squinted at the screen. A name I never expected to see, Melissa. His ex. My heart pounded as I reached for the phone. I had to know the truth. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the messages. At first, they seemed innocent, catching up, reminiscing. But then, the words turned flirtatious. I miss our late-night talks. You always understood me better than anyone. My stomach twisted. Was this just nostalgia or something more? I took a deep breath, trying to push down the anger bubbling inside me. He had lied to me before, but this felt different. I debated waking him up right then and there, demanding answers. Instead, I snapped a picture of the messages. I needed proof. The next morning, I confronted him. "Why is Melissa texting you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He barely blinked before shrugging. "It's nothing, babe. Just an old friend catching up." I held up my phone, showing him the screenshots. His face changed, just for a split second, but I saw it. Panic. Guilt. Then, just like that, it was gone. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're overreacting. She just needed advice." I wanted to believe him, but the words I had read said otherwise. Was I really just being jealous, or was there something he wasn't telling me? Days passed, but the tension lingered. I tried to move on, to convince myself it was nothing. But Daniel was different. He was suddenly overly affectionate, bringing me flowers, planning date nights. It felt forced, like he was trying too hard to make me forget. And then, one evening, as he stepped into the shower, his phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it and unlocked the screen. My breath caught in my throat. Another message from Melissa. "Did you tell her? Or are we still keeping this our little secret?" My heart pounded. A secret? I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers. As soon as he stepped out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, I held up his phone. "What exactly are you keeping secret, Daniel?" His face paled. For the first time, he was speechless. I watched as he scrambled for an explanation, his usual charm failing him. "It's not what you think," he stammered. But I had heard that before. I crossed my arms, waiting. "Then tell me, Daniel. What is it?" I could see it in his eyes. He was caught. But would he finally tell me the truth? Daniel ran a hand through his damp hair, avoiding my gaze. "Melissa just needed someone to talk to. She's going through a rough time," he muttered. I let out a dry laugh. "Oh, really? And what exactly is this secret she's talking about?" He exhaled sharply, clearly trying to think fast. She didn't want me to tell you because she knows how you'd react." My blood boiled. How I'd react? Like a wife finding out her husband is sneaking around with his ex. His silence told me everything. I wasn't overreacting. I was right. I paced the room, my heart hammering. "So, let me get this straight," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been texting her behind my back, lying to my face, and now you expect me to believe it's nothing?" He sighed. "It's not like that." I shot him a glare. "Then what is it like, Daniel?" His jaw tightened. "I just didn't want to hurt you." That was the moment I knew. He wasn't just texting her. There was something else. Something bigger. And he was terrified of me finding out. I couldn't let this go. Not when everything in my gut screamed that there was more to the story. So, I decided to play along. I faked acceptance, nodding slowly. "Fine. I'll believe you," I said, forcing a smile. His shoulders relaxed, relief flashing across his face. But I wasn't done. If he thought I'd drop it, he was dead wrong. I needed to know the full truth. And if he wouldn't tell me, I'd find out myself. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I texted Melissa. My hands trembled as I typed. "Hey, it's Daniel's wife. Can we talk?" I didn't expect a response. But minutes later, 3 little dots appeared. Then, her message popped up. "I was wondering when you'd reach out." My stomach flipped. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Meet me tomorrow," she replied. "I think you deserve to know the truth." I stared at my screen, my pulse racing. The truth? What had Daniel been hiding? The next afternoon, I sat across from Melissa in a small cafe, my heart pounding. She looked at me with something almost like pity. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she started. My hands clenched into fists under the table. "What exactly happened?" I demanded. She sighed. Daniel and we've been talking for a while. But it's not just talk. The room seemed to spin. Are you saying? She nodded. He told me he wasn't happy, that he felt trapped. My breath caught. Trapped? In our marriage? The betrayal stung deeper than I ever imagined. I sat frozen, unable to process her words. What do you mean, he wasn't happy? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Melissa's eyes softened. He said you two had drifted apart, that he didn't feel the same way anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Daniel had been telling her all of this, and I had no idea. My thoughts were clouded with disbelief and anger. So you two were, what, planning something behind my back? I spat. She looked away, ashamed. I didn't want it to go this far. I stood up suddenly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. This whole time, you were the friend he's been texting? You've been the one he's been lying to me about. My voice broke as I spoke, the betrayal too overwhelming. Melissa nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep living this lie either. Daniel promised me things would change. My mind raced. Was this the reason he'd been distant? Was he really considering leaving me for her? What exactly did he promise you? I demanded. Melissa hesitated before pulling out her phone. She unlocked it and showed me a photo, a picture of Daniel and her, laughing together at some cafe. My stomach churned. He told me he loved me, she said softly. And I loved him, too. I blinked back tears. This was it. The final confirmation that everything I feared was true. But why had he been so careful, so sneaky about it? What had made him think he could hide this from me forever? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. I stood up abruptly, my heart racing. I have to go. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice shaking. Melissa grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Wait, you need to hear the rest. It's not just about us. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? She looked at me, her eyes dark. Daniel wasn't just using me to get away from you. He was using both of us to escape something else. I froze. What are you talking about? She hesitated. He's hiding something big. And if you don't find out soon, it might destroy everything. I left the cafe feeling more confused than ever. What could Daniel possibly be hiding? Was it just me, or was there something even deeper going on? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of him and Melissa, his arms wrapped around her, laughing together as if I didn't exist. I had to know. I had to find the truth, even if it destroyed me. The following day, I went home, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I couldn't shake off what Melissa had said about Daniel hiding something even bigger. I had to find out what it was. That afternoon, as I sat in the living room, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before answering. When I opened the door, there stood a man I didn't recognize, tall, dark-haired, and with a look of urgency in his eyes. Are you Mrs. Daniels? He asked. I nodded, suspicious. Who are you? He handed me a letter without saying a word, then turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in confusion. I stood frozen for a moment, holding the envelope in my hands. My name was written on the front in neat handwriting. Slowly, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and as I read, my world came crashing down. It was a legal document, a divorce petition. My heart skipped a beat. I read it again. This wasn't just from Daniel. It was from an attorney who was representing Melissa. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was reading. Had he been planning this all along? Was this why he'd been so distant? I stared at the paper in disbelief. How could Daniel do this? He had been texting Melissa behind my back, lying to my face, and now, she was filing for divorce. But why hadn't he said anything to me? Why was everything happening behind my back? My phone buzzed suddenly, shaking me from my thoughts. It was a message from Daniel. I need to talk. Can you meet me? I didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, betrayal. But I knew one thing for sure. This conversation would change everything. I agreed to meet him, though my heart felt heavy with dread. When I arrived at the cafe, I saw him sitting at a table, his face pale and worn. He stood up as I approached, his eyes filled with guilt. Sit down, he said quietly. I took a seat, my eyes never leaving his. I don't even know where to begin, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. I never meant for any of this to happen. I crossed my arms. Then why did it happen, Daniel? Why did you lie to me for so long? He took a deep breath, looking down at the table. Because I was scared, okay? I was scared that you'd leave me, Daniel continued, his voice barely a whisper. I thought if I stayed with you, I'd be stuck in a life I didn't want. But when I met Melissa again, I realized what I was missing. She made me feel alive again, like the person I used to be. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. I felt my chest tighten with every word he spoke. He had been lying to me for months, and now he was telling me this? The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I sat there, stunned. His words felt like a betrayal, a punch in the gut. So, you thought the best way to fix this was to lie to me? I asked, my voice shaking. To text your ex and make me think I was crazy for questioning you? Daniel looked at me with tear-filled eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, but I didn't know how to fix it without losing you completely. My heart cracked. The man I had trusted with everything was now a stranger. You don't fix things by running away, Daniel, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You face them. You communicate. I don't know what I want anymore, Daniel confessed, his voice breaking. I don't know if I still love you, or if I even know what love is anymore. I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. It was as if the world had stopped spinning. The life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, were all crumbling in front of me. I stood up abruptly. I can't do this. I can't be here, pretending everything's fine. Daniel's eyes widened in panic. Wait, don't leave, he begged. Please, just give me some time to figure things out. But I had already made my decision. I walked away, leaving Daniel behind. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in that place any longer. My mind was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about him, was a lie. I needed space. I needed clarity. As I walked down the street, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had given him so many chances, but this time, I wasn't sure if I could forgive him. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Daniel. I'm sorry, but I need you to know, I've already signed the divorce papers. The words hit me like a slap to the face. He had already signed the papers? It was like a final blow to everything we had built. I couldn't believe it. The man I had spent years with, the man I thought I'd grow old with, had already made the decision to end it. I stared at the screen in disbelief. How could he make such a huge decision without even discussing it with me? The anger rose in my chest. He was already moving on, while I was still left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, the reality of it all hit me. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. This was about me. I had spent so much of my life trying to make him happy, trying to be the perfect wife, but in the process, I had lost myself. I wasn't just a victim of his lies. I had allowed it to happen. I had ignored the signs, made excuses for his behavior, and convinced myself everything was fine. But now, it was time to face the truth. I needed to heal, to find myself again. And I couldn't do that while holding on to a relationship that was already broken. The days that followed felt like a blur. I spent most of my time in a daze, trying to come to terms with everything. Daniel's words, his actions, they kept echoing in my mind. I was drowning in my own thoughts, constantly asking myself where things had gone wrong. Was it my fault? Had I done something to push him away? I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. I couldn't keep letting this consume me. I had to move on, for my own sanity. I just wasn't sure where to begin. I began to focus on the small things, things that made me feel like myself again. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with, spent time doing things I loved, but had neglected. I started running again, feeling the wind against my face as I pushed myself further each day. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild the parts of myself I had lost along the way. But even as I worked on healing, a part of me still couldn't shake the image of Daniel with Melissa. The betrayal haunted me, even in my moments of peace. One afternoon, as I was walking through the park, I ran into an old friend from college, Sarah. We hadn't seen each other in years, but seeing her again felt like a breath of fresh air. It's been too long, she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. We spent the next hour catching up, talking about everything from our careers to relationships. I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks, and for that brief moment, it felt like everything was okay. Sarah could sense my unease, though. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready, she said gently. But whatever you're going through, you'll get through it. Just as I was starting to feel like I was moving forward, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. I need to talk to you. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right. Can we meet? I stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to yell at him, tell him how much he had hurt me. But another part of me, the The part that still loved him despite everything, wanted to hear him out. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't ready to face him, not yet. Days passed before I finally worked up the courage to meet him. When we sat down together, the silence was thick, almost suffocating. Daniel looked at me with a mixture of guilt and desperation. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm asking you for one, Melissa. I've realized I made a huge mistake. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I just want to make it right." I stared at him, the man who had once been my everything. But I had changed. I wasn't the same woman I had been when I first married him. I had found my strength again, and I knew that I deserved more than the lies and betrayal he had given me. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.